fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCS 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Today I've got a couple of guys with me, Mr. Joe Goldberg, of course.
Hello. Happy to be here.
And Mr. Eric Shapiro has stopped the presses just to come in and talk.
How's it going, Al?
It's going good.
Good.
It's going good. We'll see what happens. I'm really trying to get on the next Bud Light can.
Well, whatever I can do to support you.
Everybody's got a dream. Yeah, everybody's got a dream, Al. Go for it.
I'm working it this week. I'm going to get out there. Today we have got an internationally best-selling author. What can I say? He's a great writer, and we're glad he's here. So, Mr. Don Winslow, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Well, Don, so it looks like you've been doing really well. So what's the secret? Like, how does that happen? Like, how does a guy get into this kind of gig? So I know.
Yeah.
In case I don't get on the beer can, I got to know what to do here.
Yeah, you need a fallback plan. Yeah, well, listen, guys, I was an overnight success in my 50s, so I might be the last person to ask that question. But yeah, thank you. Things have been going well. The books have been doing okay, and there's movies and TV that are being made, and so everything's good. I wish I had a more interesting and romantic answer to that. The plain truth, though, is, I just treat it like a job, and I go to work in the morning and finish in the evening, and that's kind of it,
When you say overnight success in your 50s, do you mean like had you done a number of books up until that point, or when
yeah.
When kind of breakout happened? What exactly happened?
Yeah, I've had a few breakouts.
Okay.
Like I've been eating pizza or something, but yeah. No, look, I think my first book was published in 91.
Okay.
And I think I was 6 published books into my career before I could quit my day jobs.
Wow. Okay.
Because I think my first book I sold for a whopping $7,500. And then, listen, my career has flatlined, several times in between. I wrote a book called The Power of the Dog, a big kind of tome about the Mexican drug cartels.
Yeah.
And, that took 6.5 years. And after that book came out, I think I had $37 in the bank.
Wow. And so when was the last flatline? When was the most recent flatline period?
Boy, it was probably around then, I did Dog. I did a book called Frankie Machine, The Winter of Frankie Machine. And they all got great reviews, but I wasn't selling a ton of books. And then I signed with my dear friend, Shane Salerno, who's a A-list screenwriter in his own right, wrote little movies like Armageddon and the sequels to Avatar and that kind of thing.
Wow.
And Shane sort of turned it around overnight.
So Shane wrote Savages. He adapted Savages.
He and I adapted Savages together. Yep.
So how did that come to be?
Shane and I did a TV series years ago together called UC Undercover, and we became good friends. And in the interim years, I'd call him up and tell him what was going on, and he'd offer advice and, tell me, maybe you should sign with that person and not with this one, or, here's what they intend for that film, or they don't. He always had sort of great intelligence, both with a small eye and a large eye. About it. And finally, around the time that Savages was published, we made it formal. And he said, well, what if I represent you? And I said, great. I was his first client. And now he has 40 some odd, and, with lots of New York Times bestsellers and big film deals and things. But I was sort of the test crash dummy, for the Story Factory. So that's how that came about. And, we've never had a contract.
Wow. And so Shane doubles as an agent and screenwriter?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's kind of rare, isn't it?
Oh, I think unique. I think more than rare. I can't think of another example. And, tremendously energetic guy and obviously, genius. So that's what turned it around for me, but it was a struggle. It was a war, what we had to do over the course of about 2 years to become, financially stable and all of that kind of stuff.
Was that novels or short stories?
All of the
a lot of different things.
All of the above, primarily novels because I'm primarily a novelist. I think I've done, I don't know, maybe 20 short stories. That's just a guess. Never really sat down and counted them. We did the screenplay of Savages together. And then he talked me into writing a book that became The Cartel, which was, probably a breakout moment.
How many novels have there been so far?
I'm not being coy. I think it's 23.
Okay. And all right, so you're talking about movie adaptations, TV adaptations. I want to get into all this stuff, but
sure.
Frankie Machine, which is one of the ones I read, which I loved. I heard for years that was supposed to be made by Michael Mann, then Scorsese. De Niro was always attached to this as the star, and it seemed like such a natural, exciting movie. I want to hear about how far that got and why it hasn't happened.
What went wrong?
There. Yeah.
There's a story to it, of course. Frankie bounced around a little bit, and then, it was Scorsese and De Niro that picked it up. I remember the day De Niro called the house, and, I pick up the phone here and it says, "Hi, this is Bobby De Niro." And I said, "Yeah, this is Tinkerbell." Cause I thought it was some friend of mine, goofing around, and they were all set to do it. And then, and I actually wrote a column about this. I'm not telling tales out of school. A very fine screenwriter named Eric Roth.
Oh, yeah.
Who wrote, among other things, the great film Munich. He sent De Niro a book called You Paint Houses, Don't You? A nonfiction book about an Irish hitman in order to help him do research to play Frankie Machine.
Wow.
But it turned out that De Niro and Scorsese liked that book more than they liked Frankie.
Man.
Yeah, they did that book.
And it became The Irishman.
Yeah. Joe Grant.
Yeah. So that's how that happened. And I wrote a column, maybe for Deadline Hollywood or one of those things, entitled "I Blame Eric Roth," and Roth and I have had good laughs about it.
It was interesting because I was aware of the Frankie Machine pending adaptation for so long that that's what made me aware of you and your work. So I'm wondering, like in retrospect, did that create a good zone of publicity that paid off in its own right, or was it just frustrating?
Yeah, just frustrating.
Yeah.
Listen, it's always great when people like Martin Scorsese and Michael Mann and Robert De Niro, they're all very nice people. There are no hard feelings here, by the way, at all. Are interested in your work, and that does pump you up, I think, publicly, and it's also a very good feeling. But of course, at the same time, it's frustrating to get that far and then not have the film made. But stay tuned. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and then, so Savages did get made, and this was after all that activity with Frankie Machine, right?
Oh, yeah, well after, yeah.
Yeah, and then I love the book Savages, and I like the film very much. Of course, we want to ask you about Oliver Stone. I think, Al, last time I was on, we had a Stone debunker, which is a whole other conversation about JFK.
Okay.
But I was just curious, and I'm a huge Oliver Stone fan, by the way, and I actually think that was one of his, that was his most recent really strong feature. And I thought he did a serviceable job, but I'm curious, how you felt about the film and how the experience was with him.
Oh, I liked the film. Look, I liked the film. Did I agree with everything? No. I think Oliver and I had a disagreement in how the story actually ended.
Yeah, he had two endings.
Yeah. He added kind of in my opinion, a rump ending onto it. But,
right.
But listen, I'm aware that you're talking about two different breeds of cat. When you talk about a novel and you talk about a film, they have different needs. The one is static and horizontal, and the other one is vertical and kinetic and very time sensitive. So it was an education. Oliver is Oliver. What can I say? I mean, he's an interesting guy. I took him out location scouting and all that kind of thing. He's a bit frustrating. He would say, well, what does a money launderer's office look like? And I would take him to one,
Yeah, wow.
And then he'd say, no, that's not what it looks like.
Wow.
I'd say, yeah, but Oliver, it is. It's exactly what it looks like. Or, what would a marijuana dealer's house, in Orange County look like? No, that's not it. Okay. But, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of tough, maybe a little hard-headed.
Yeah, Oliver has his own opinions, but he would probably say the same of me.
Got you. Okay, the thing I want to comment on, and I know the other hosts are going to jump in with a bunch of questions, is when I read your work, because I've read The Winter of Frankie Machine and I've read Savages, the thing that stands out to me that I always think of when I think of your prose is that every sentence counts so much. Like, it's like you never let a sentence land halfway. Like, each one is a lightning bolt. And I'm just curious if that's intentional and how quickly you write, how long you spend honing and editing, or what your comment is on that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Look, I write a lot of drafts and I'm continuously rewriting, right? Like, I start work at 5:30. So by 2:30 in the afternoon, by around this time of the day, right, I know that anything new I write is going to be garbage. And so, but I don't want to quit the day yet. So what I do is I go back and rewrite, usually at random, So my early drafts, I write very fast. I write like I'm going to get caught, and I'm not thinking about the reader at all. I'm only entertaining myself. But as subsequent drafts go on, and then particularly toward those very late drafts, all I'm thinking about is the reader. All I'm thinking about is honing down and honing down and honing down so that, and thank you for saying that, every sentence counts, every word counts. I honestly believe that sometimes a syllable can tilt a chapter.
No question,
Yeah. And so I'll go back and I'll do goofy things, like I'll think, okay, today I'm just going to look at the verbs in this chapter, just the verbs. Is it the right verb? Is it the best verb? Is it accurate? Is there a better verb available? I might do the same thing another day with nouns. Another day I'll sit back far away from the computer that I can't make out words. I can only see the shape on the pages. And ask myself, does the sequence look like what it is?
Oh, wow.
Well, that's part of my questions right off of what Eric's talking about. When people read Don Winslow books, first of all, they say Don Winslow knows how to tell stories. He's a storyteller. And he knows how to write those stories. And I always say there's two things in there that make them more unique than everybody else. One, I see dialogue as a character for you. Is dialogue a character? Because it is outstanding.
Well, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Look, man, I grew up around great storytellers. My old man was a sailor, career Navy guy, and he'd sit around with his drinking buddies and they'd tell stories. And I literally sat at the feet of some of the great storytellers of all time. And then, my mom was a librarian, so we always had books and we were never censored. I say we, my sister and me. We're never censored. We're allowed to read anything we wanted at any age. And so I think I had that early advantage of reading great storytellers, In terms of dialogue, yeah, I read my dialogue out loud to myself. Because I won't hear the right notes, I will hear the wrong ones. I'll hear the bad ones. And then you get a chance to correct them. You hear those clangers, and even though you're sitting in a room by yourself, you feel embarrassed. It's like, how can I write that?
I'm taking notes here. This is good stuff. One other part of that, which Eric and you guys are talking about with Oliver Stone, how take it to a drug dealer's office, location.
Yeah.
You feel it when you're reading San Diego or Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And I know that's important to you. How do you make it, though, stand out so the reader says to themselves, I can see the desert in The Heron or something like that?
Thank you so much for that, because location's extremely important to me. I don't think I can separate it from either story or character, because we're all such products of our environments. The answer is pretty simple: time. there's no substitute for time. And it's time hanging out. It's time driving around. It's time walking around. It's time sitting someplace, until you feel that you know it so well that you can smell it and then you can taste it. And for me, it's a matter of trying to either keep the description short, so that you try to make one or two words evocative of other things, or it's a matter of trying to be lyrical, where maybe I get in the head of the character who's thinking about those places or experiencing those places, and I try to convey the same feeling that I have about them. I fall in love with locations. I can remember to this day the first time I saw the Pacific Coast Highway in Southern California. And now 35 years later, I'm as excited driving that road as I was the first day.
Those are your PI days.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's how I stumbled on it. I was in sort of inland Orange County. I had a witness punk out on me. I had an unexpected day off. I thought, what am I going to do? All right, I'll drive out to the coast. And I come over this hill near Laguna Beach, California, and the ocean is like almost vertical in front of me. And I just thought, yeah, I'm in love,
Are you conscious of how you're writing violence and sex and putting it on the page for readers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very aware. It's troublesome, It's a difficult ethical subject, and then it's a difficult technical subject. Ethics first, when you write. Look, I spent 27 years on the drug beat, writing books about the war in Mexico, which was extraordinarily violent and sadistic. And early on in that process, I had to come to a decision about how to write violence. And the choices to simplify it a little bit are, do you sanitize it for the reader, or do you show it realistically? I made a decision, I hope was the correct one, to show the violence realistically. Mind you, in those 3 books, there's not an incident of violence that didn't actually happen. I didn't create any of that. And then having made that decision, it's tough because you don't want to cross what is, I think, a quite thin line between narrative fiction and, let's call it, the pornography of violence. And that's a hard border to dance on, and maybe sometimes I crossed it. If I did, it was inadvertent. Later on, I started to come to the conclusion that too much violence in a book inures the reader to it, so it no longer has an effect. It's like real life, You see enough violence, and unfortunately, you do become desensitized to it. So then more and more I started to write not the violent incident itself as much as I did the reaction to it, of people coming onto it afterwards, or the funeral, or the feelings of the family afterwards, because that seemed to be a way to get at the real emotion of it. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It's just I was just more thinking about how aware or how sensitive you were, because it's times change, obviously.
Yes, they do.
So people's reactions and what they look for and when they read, but it must be tough to be balanced in the sense that you've got to make the reader aware of something that happens, even if it's bad. But you want to be sensitive because so that kind of doing the reaction is a good answer.
Yeah, listen, it's hard, people often bring up to me a chapter, a scene in a book of mine called The Power of the Dog, where a guy throws 2 children off a bridge to their deaths.
Yep.
And I remember the day that I wrote that scene, and how I felt afterwards. And again, it was a choice. Now that happened in reality. I wanted people to get a real sense of what the drug war in Mexico was like. And so I decided to write that scene. When I was writing The Cartel, the violence in Mexico had elevated, if that's the word, to a point none of us could have imagined in our worst nightmares. There were things I did not put in The Cartel that I know for a fact happened because they were too horrendous.
I have to think it sounds very, each book is very intense. You're very involved in it. How much does it change you when you complete a book?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My wife says that after Cartel, I was depressed. I'm not sure that I agree with her. I think that the research for that kind of book makes you sadder. It makes you angry. It certainly made me more political than I ever thought I'd be. So I think that, of all my books, I mean, if any had kind of a personal effect or a lasting effect, it was that drug trilogy, because again, over the course of, 27 years, you see a lot, you get to know people who don't survive it. You, at the funerals or in the prisons, and it can't help but have its effect, I think. Now, having said that, guys, I want to make it very clear. I don't want to compare myself in any way to the Mexican journalists, who covers that, over 200 of whom have been murdered and sometimes tortured for doing that. I'm not that hero, so when we talk about the effect on me of this, I don't want to over dramatize that.
There's also, within all of this, with the discussion of violence and journalism and realism and how it affects you emotionally, there's also the motive on your end, inevitably, as a novelist, to make it entertaining.
Sure.
And suspenseful and involving. So how does that factor in? How do you balance that with the realism?
You have to remember what your job is, I'll, in the early drafts, be writing it very realistically with no thought to the suspense or the structure or the novelistic, if you will, aspects of it. Later on, draft 10, draft 14, somewhere in there, when I'm going back, all I'm thinking about is the structure, the suspense, the drama. Is it doing its job on that level? And so there's I guess you'd call it compartmentalization. I guess that's a word. Of those aspects.
There's also humor.
Cold-blooded about it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, in Savages in particular, but I also remember in Frankie Machine, there's humor also. So I guess it's a juggling of these various human emotions.
Yeah, but that's life, isn't it? I think we flip from tragedy to comedy very quickly. Mm-hmm. And in all reality, I mean, I wrote a book called The Force about the NYPD, and there's I want to say it's 35-page sequence in there where nothing happens. It's just 5 cops sitting around a dinner table telling funny stories. The editor kept taking it out. I kept putting it back in. And because they were great stories, and they were real. I'd heard those stories from cops. And I think there is, just as there is humor in real life in those situations, there needs to be humor in the fiction as well. And I enjoy putting it in.
That reminded me also, I remember reading in the trades with The Force, which I haven't read the novel. I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, there was supposed to be an adaptation directed by James Mangold.
Yeah,
written by David Mamet.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, what happened with that?
Still bubbling. You know how these things,
okay.
These are crock pots, not pressure cookers.
Yeah, well said. I'm also on that note curious about screenwriting and how you feel it differs from prose writing, particularly because you specifically have a very spare prose style. So I'm curious what your comment on screenwriting is.
I am not one of those novelists that looks down on screenwriters. I think it's a very difficult and demanding art form. Because it's an intermediate product, for one, right? A novel is a novel. When I hit send and the book comes out, they put a cover on it, but it looks pretty much what it looked like when it came out of the computer. Mm-hmm. A screenplay, of course, is an intermediate product, and literally hundreds of people are going to have their impact on what it eventually looks like. And also, and I alluded to this earlier, they have such different needs, a book and a film. A reader could, pick a book up and set it down, pick it up and set it down. That movie, though, is running on a continuum and a timeline. And that it's always ticking, and so every word and every syllable and every scene has to do multiple things. So, I think I'm a decent screenwriter. I don't think I'm a great screenwriter. I know a few, so I know the difference. But it's an art form that I truly admire. And sometimes too, it's a little annoying, but sometimes that screenwriter will come up with better ideas than I have.
Take credit, Don.
No, man, I'll share it. For example, they're making a television series of those 3 drug books right now on FX. And the writers have come up with ideas that I wish I'd come up with. I went, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. That's really good.
So it sounds like you're dealing with a lot of important issues in real life. Are you actually hoping the reader gets something out of it besides entertainment?
Yeah, look, my first job is to entertain, and I never forget that. Okay. And I have nothing at all negative or demeaning to say about books that are exclusively entertainment. Good on them. I read them. I love them. And they're very difficult to pull off, to achieve. Having said that, I think I came to a point in my career, and again, not to be boring, we're going back to those drug books, where I felt that I needed to make a stronger statement or try to impact people on a more serious level. Otherwise, I was afraid I would be just another guy making money off dope. In researching and writing those books, I saw a lot of stuff. I came to certain pretty strong opinions about the so-called war on drugs, about mass incarceration, about immigration. And so I guess my hope is that a novel can do things that journalism can't always do. You know what I mean? Like, headlines always have a way of becoming stereotypes. And so let's take immigration. You can talk about, quote, illegal immigration, although I would argue that no human being is illegal. So it's one thing to read about it in the paper, but it becomes a stereotype. It's another thing if I can get a reader to spend hours or days with a 10-year-old boy, fleeing violence in his home and trying to make it to the United States on a train. It's one thing to read about the opioid epidemic. And again, it always becomes a stereotype. It's another thing if the reader spends time with a 26-year-old heroin addict and learns what her life is like from the inside, through their eyes. And I hope that has had some kind of impact on some readers.
Well, let's go back to the force. You were right about those 35 pages, by the way.
Thank you.
Those are great. I pretty much read all your books here.
Thanks.
Your new series. I'm halfway through the next book. You sent me an arc. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
I always get a sense when I read Don Winslow that there's more than just you've done research and you've written a book. That there are Alice's question. There are themes. There may be old themes.
Yeah.
Old historical classic books that show up in these books that maybe people don't see. Am I right or wrong on that?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. When I sometimes, I very rarely speak with groups of writers, but occasionally I speak with groups of crime writers. And I'm always trying to say that we look for our roots in a soil that's too shallow. We go back to Raymond Chandler, or sometimes we go back to Acon and Doyle. But this is what I was doing in these books, we also need to go back to Dickens, to Fielding, to Shakespeare. Godfather is a retelling of Shakespeare's Henry IV. And then we go back to the classics, to the Greeks and to the Romans, because really, by the time those boys were finished, every theme that we typically explore in my much beloved crime fiction genre had already been done. I read the Greek tragic dramas. They are noir plots. If you put a trumpet score behind them and shot them in black and white, you have noir. When you look at the Iliad, it's about a gang war. Right. You look at the Odyssey and the Aeneid, it's about fugitives. And so I very much have those themes in mind, but I don't think you can avoid them. I think that they're part of our heritage, and they're part of what we owe to our heritage. Well, do I sound preachy, don't I?
Yeah, but it's good because your current series starts off with a battle over a woman, right? Sound familiar historically?
Exactly. And, it's so funny you should say that, because when I first read the Iliad, which embarrassingly was later in life, I thought, I already know this story. I saw it played out in the beaches of New England. It started a gang war that lasted for 10 years and cost 40 lives. And I remember it as a child. And that's what gave me the idea to do these books.
I'm going to ask one question, then I'll let everybody else go. I'm an audiobook guy too. That's so I can burn through Don Winslow books quick. And I also buy them so I can read the words because I want to see how you put them together. What do you think of hearing your words spoken out like that?
Listen, I'm all for it. I am not an audiobook listener particularly. I tend to be just much more a visual reader. But listen, the people who've done my books have been great, I think, and it's fun to listen to that. And speaking about our roots, I always remember that stories, including, by the way, the Iliad, were originally spoken and not read.
Yes.
And so, that aspect of reading aloud, and as I said, I often read aloud my own dialogue to myself and occasionally my own narrative, not so often. I think it's an important element. And I also think that we forget, by the way, that when people are visually reading our books, they are hearing the words in their brain. Whether, they're listening to an audiobook or they're reading it, they are hearing it. And so there's always that aspect in the writing.
Don, at this point in your career where you've accumulated 20 plus novels, and there's obviously a lot of feedback, and not only in terms of critic writing, but also Amazon reviews and meeting readers at book signings, do you have an idea of what your readers, your fans are expecting, and how much do you interact with that idea when you're writing?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. I think I would be doing them a disservice. If I were to sort of categorize what a Don Winslow reader is, I think I'm insulting them. Mm-hmm. I think I'm insulting their intelligence. And so I don't want to do that. And I just want to tell the stories that I want to tell and tell them as best I can. And then hope that they find a readership and that the readership I have enjoys them. Some of my readers, obviously enjoy other stories more than others, So I'll get mail saying, man, I love your surfing stories. I wish you wrote more of those. I'm not so crazy about the others, or vice versa, and that's fine. I think that once a book is out there, it doesn't belong to the author anymore. I would never tell a reader what the correct interpretation of a book is, or the correct reaction. I think their experience belongs to them. So no, I really, obviously I've met thousands of my readers over the years going on book tours and things, and, feedback on social media more recently and all of that. But I don't try to, characterize them and then write to them.
Got it. And then, of course, first and foremost, it's you. I would imagine, based on what you just said, you're writing for yourself at the core.
Yeah. In those initial drafts, that's the only way I know how to do it. I need to be in love with it. I need to be passionate about it, and excited, every day to get up and do it. And then later, I'm probably just as excited to try to hone it for the reader. But initially, when I'm conceiving a project or thinking, do I want to write this or do I want to write that? It's very selfish. It's just stuff that interests me and that I'm passionate about.
Are you ride or die crime fiction? Is that where you expect to be until the end of your career?
Yeah.
And is that strictly out of love and excitement and passion, or is there also a commercial component to that where when another one goes out with Don Winslow on the cover, there's a certain baseline expectation of how it will do?
Oh, sure. Look, I'm not naive, and I've been around a while, so I know that a Don Winslow novel is going to be a crime novel. Mm-hmm. Having said that, yeah, I've been in love with the genre for a long, long time. Now, it's not the only genre I read, by the way. I read a lot of nonfiction, and I read some. I don't know what the phrase is, general fiction. I don't know, what to call it. But I love the genre. I was once asked by a journalist in not a terribly friendly way. He said, "Do you think as a crime fiction writer you live in a literary ghetto?"
Oh, wow.
Ouch. Yeah.
And I said, absolutely.
That was my next question.
Well, let me give you the answer. Absolutely, and I love my neighborhood. And I love my neighbors,
Yeah, you're with the people in your genre. It's populist. But that's no comment on the literary, artistic, or intellectual value at all.
Well, I don't know. Some people think it is, and I think that we have, in a perverse way, profited from being looked down on a little bit.
Okay.
I think it's given us a chip on the shoulder that's quite useful. And it makes me laugh when I get questions like that, because if you find better narrative prose than Raymond Chandler, please let me know.
Right.
No
well said.
Right. If you read the first few paragraphs of The Long Goodbye out loud, sheer poetry. Mm-hmm. And so I'm aware of the literary value of what we do. I really am. And there are so many authors in our genre and out of our genre that I'm in awe of. Absolutely in awe of.
Who should we read, Don? Who should we read?
Besides me.
Oh, man, come on.
Al.
Besides Al. Well, I don't know. If we get over that hurdle, listen, the classics, Chandler, Hammett, the two McDonalds, in terms of just the pure writer's writer, Lawrence Block, I think is pretty wonderful. The late Charles Willeford, was great. I always a little afraid of this question for leaving somebody out.
Yeah.
Dennis Lehane, you're not going to find a better book than The Given Day. George V. Higgins, I think, wrote the best crime novel ever, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. There's so many. I got to go to Raymond Chandler's house, in La Jolla. It was just like going to church, I got to go to the room where The Long Goodbye was written. I was quivering. Amazing.
You're a fan.
Oh yeah, I'm a disciple. But there's so many great writers in our genre. Stephen King. Maybe not exactly in the crime genre, but around there. What a great writer he is, and what a great guy he is. And that's the other thing, man. I like the people in this genre. I like the writers. There's not a lot of backstabbing. There's a lot of mutual support. Just good people, which makes life a lot more fun.
Is there any world, forgive the question because I'm sure I know the answer, but is there any world in which the TV movie end of things is so active and lucrative that you bow out of novels?
No, I don't think so. Listen, as I said, FX is making the 3 drug books, and there's been a lot of interest from streaming, platforms and other pieces. No, look, guys, I'm retiring. I wrote the 3rd book in this trilogy, and I think that's going to be it for me. Oh. So it's not really a kind of an active question about that. But I think I'm smart enough maybe, to know what I'm good at, which is not a lot. And I think I'm pretty good at writing a crime novel. And I like doing it. So, I would stay with that. But again, I'm kind of in the process of wrapping things up now.
So that's it. So it's the moot question because the end of the trilogy is the mic drop.
Yeah.
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 He's going to become a
dancer.
dancer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I missed that.
going to become a dancer now, aren't you?
A dancer.
Broadway beckons.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I was born in spite of rhythm, not with it. I don't, I don't think anybody wants to see me dance or sing.
Was this so with your retirement, was this sort of a Tarantino move where, like, at a certain point, I don't know if it was from the very beginning, but he decided his body of work would be 10 films and there's still one more remaining, which he just announced. So was this something you kind of knew from the get-go that, okay, you're not going to...
No.
Okay, so this is something that snuck up on you along the way.
Yeah, I don't know that I use the phrase snuck up.
Okay.
I think that I've been contemplating it for a while, but, we don't get to choose the times we live in, do we? And I started looking around at the country and the world, around 2015 or so. You can do the math.
Yeah.
And got sort of more and more vocal and active about some of the things that I was seeing. Things have only gotten worse, and in some ways. And so I think that, a big part of the decision to retire from crime writing was to be able to vote, more time and more energy to what I think is an important fight right now.
So how exactly does that show up? So how does that manifest in your work?
Well, look, there's only so much time in the day. There's only so much mental energy, and so it got increasingly difficult to write both books and do the political stuff as well. I think that the political stuff has an urgency to it that novels simply don't.
Got it. Okay.
And so, you just, suit up and show up, I guess.
And so I take it to mean, as a matter of course, given the way things have gone, in the meantime, you're proud of your body of work. Like, is there also a feeling of being settled around the fiction? Like, this is my statement, this is how this ended up, and you feel at peace with it?
Yeah, I'm definitely at peace with it, 23 novels, 2 kind of major trilogies. I've been trying to write this trilogy for 28 years, and in some ways it's the work of my lifetime. And so to complete that, and then that coinciding with the times we're in, just felt like the right call.
Well, if someone says, "Hey, Don, what book should I read to get the quintessential Don?" You know the question's coming. Is it the trilogy? Is it this trilogy? Is it the ones you've been working on, or is it? Read this book. This is the one that I was on fire. My best dialogue, my best everything.
I don't think I can do that. I'm not going to answer that question. That's impossible. Come on. I don't know. I used to have a pat answer to that, but it was a true pat answer. It was like my next book, because you always should be, dancing with the woman you're in love with, right? But I don't have that pat answer available to me anymore. Looking back on 23 books, I'm fond of all of them, but in different ways. I guess like maybe you are with your children. I don't know. I only have one kid, so I don't really know. But, they're all a little different. And, I don't know that I could pick out one book. Now, sometimes people ask me that question, like, "Oh, I've never read you. What book should I read?" And just in sort of talking to them and getting to know them a little bit, I can say, well, maybe you should start with this one or this one, just because I kind of know them a little bit, but as a sort of general question, I don't think I could answer it.
At this point, are you doing social media, website? How do you like fans and readers to find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. Don Winslow on Twitter, and then Shane and I do videos on Twitter. Yeah, so that's how you find us.
No TikTok?
No TikTok.
Oh. You got to get on there. Start dancing.
I don't. No dancing for me. Although if you go on Twitter, actually, there's these 2 Irish dancers, the brothers, who do this incredible Irish dancing, who've done 2 little videos for my books.
Oh, that's pretty good.
It's fun. Go watch it. They're like tossing the book around and dancing and all. It's really fun. Yeah.
So what's next then? What are you going to, that's it? You're just going to do this tour and that's it? Or are you going to do anything else other than the politics?
No. Well, listen, the 3rd book comes out in a year from now.
Okay.
And so I'll be back, doing promotions for that. That will be a finale. And then, no, I'm just doing the social media, for lack of a better word, activism thing.
Will you miss writing?
Sure. It's strange. I'm coming on now just about a year of not writing novels. And so I don't have that much experience with it because a lot of that year was on tour and some other stuff that was going on. And so I'm now just kind of getting used to the idea. So let's see,
Yeah.
But yeah, I miss it. Look, when you spend, 30 something years doing the same thing every day, and then you get up and you're having your coffee and you're thinking, oh, I don't need to do 10 pages today. It's a different kind of feeling. Sure.
I guess your relationship with your books have changed over the years. Has there been certain books that have gotten better for you, like you've become closer to over years?
No, I don't think so. I'm sorry to disappoint. I don't, I don't go back and read my books, because again, always involved in the book I'm doing right at the moment, but, I don't think the relationship with the books have changed much, to tell you the truth.
Love them and leave them.
There you go.
Well, it's been a real pleasure.
Mine. I've really enjoyed it, guys.
So now, of course, the new book is called City of Dreams, a novel, and our guest is the author of that book, Don Winslow. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.